Good morning, afternoon or evening, and welcome to the final installment of the Faction Overview series. Can you believe that it's over already? I mean, it's taken, after all, just a couple of years after starting what should have been a pretty quick series to get here. And with the final installment, we get to what is probably the most overpowered faction available. Because they're so simple to use and so widely used, that's why I saved them for last. But anyway, here they are, for your 0 AD viewing pleasure, the inhabitants of my personal home island, the Britons. So, the Britons. As previously discussed, they're not dissimilar to the Gauls. In fact, they're basically identical, but they do have some key differences in terms of units and buildings that, in my personal opinion, make them the better option of the two. Although I'm at pains to say that lots of people prefer them the other way round, so you certainly shouldn't take that as the definitive opinion. So, what are the big things to look out for? Well, as with the Gauls, your supplementary buildings like farmsteads and storehouses will give you a +2 population bonus, while a barracks is +4 and a temple is the usual 5. Of these buildings, for a non-Celtic civilization, only the temple includes a population bonus, so this is pretty good. Also, the buildings are all going to be weaker than other factions' equivalent buildings, but they're substantially faster to build. So, while you lose 20% of the hit points, you also see a 20% reduction in build time for pretty much everything. So, a 5-person house is 24 seconds to build as opposed to the usual 30, but will only have 640 hit points rather than 800. Another example is a barracks will have 1600 hit points rather than 2000, and 120 seconds to build rather than 150. These two factors mean that you can develop incredibly quickly, as you don't need so much wood for houses because of the extra population bonus, and you can also build the structures required to progress much more quickly than non-Celtic factions. As with the Gauls, they have a very limited range of troops and siege weapons available, and nothing with very long range. So this makes them a good option for beginners as they're easy to play with, but it can make them a little bit uninteresting once you start to really understand the game. And the flip side of the fast development and limited soldiers is that if the game lasts a long time, there's a good chance your troops are going to struggle against other factions' more advanced siege weapons and greater champions. So make sure you are quick, or it could be bad news for you. And those are the main things to be aware of. So let's get into looking at the Britons details, starting with the units. Now overall, the units are exactly the same as the Gauls, in that your opening cavalryman is a skirmisher, and your basic infantry units are a spearman, a skirmisher, and a slinger. However, there is a big change, and that is the swapping of slingers and skirmishers at Phase 1. This means that an early slinger rush is 100% on, and can mean that a game is finished off without even the need for resignation after just a few minutes. When you hit Phase 2, you'll add to your cavalry skirmisher a cavalry swordsman. And this is it for citizen soldiers, which is another small but solid setup. However, the big difference in terms of soldiers is not actually a soldier at all. It's the war dog. The war dog is just a cracking unit that offers a lot in terms of options. They're relatively cheap at 100 food, and you can have up to 50 of them, and they don't even count towards your population cap. The big thing about them, though, is that you start with one on top of your human citizens. Now, this can be used to scout the map, kill animals that you'd like to be hunting, such as deer, or to harass your opponent early on. It's a versatile and useful starting unit. One of their best units is simply to send a large group around the side of the map until you reach your enemy's civic centre. From there, they can harass the women farmers and totally disrupt your opponent's food supply. Your unique buildings are few in number when compared to other factions, but they're still quite interesting. And the first one we'll look at is the island settlement. It's a properly unique building, as there's literally nothing else like it in the game, and I suppose it's a nice little testament to the fact that Britons are based on an island. Or maybe I'm reading too much into this. Anyway, it costs 500 each of wood, metal and stone, and it needs to be built on water, so that rules out its usefulness on mainland maps. But on any map with water, as it's essentially a civic centre that has territory, it can train all your Phase 1 troops that are available in your civic centre, and it gives access to all your naval units, and that includes merchant vessels. Although there is a strange situation here, is that while you can train merchant ships, as you're effectively referring to this as a civic centre, they can't act as a trading point, which means that if you want to trade, you're going to need to build 2 additional docks, which is a bit weird. But on the plus side, like a civic centre, you can still deposit any resources that you collect there, including fish, which does give it a bit of a seafaring use. The second building we'll look at is the kennel, and this building is how you train your war dogs, and they can be trained from phase 2, but they're pretty expensive to be honest. A cost of 50 each of wood and stone plus 200 metal isn't cheap, but for a faction with very limited army variety, this can be a really useful building. As we've already established, war dogs aren't included in your population cap, but you can only train up to 10 dogs for each kennel that you've built, so you're effectively running 2 separate population caps in parallel. The maximum number of kennels you're allowed is 5, and that doesn't depend on the overall maximum population, it's just always 5. So the most dogs you can train is 50, but that's more than enough to cause plenty of issues for your opponent, as if they haven't built palisades or walls around their farms, you can easily kill all their female farmers in just a few seconds. And while we're discussing farming, why not focus on the final unique building? It's the rotary mill, and for farmers within its bonus range, which is 60 metres, the gather rate will increase by 25%. So fewer farms are needed to support your army, and that means greater population capacity saved for soldiers, which is a nice little bonus for the Britons. In terms of siege weapons, your options are limited in much the same way as the Gauls are. Your only option you're going to get is a ram, and that's it. But to be honest, that's all you need with this faction, as they're so overpowered. If you can grab a ram or two, get a massive slingers together and a few spearmen, just point them at your enemy. If you've progressed to phase 3 quickly enough, then this is an almost undefendable attack for an opponent at phase 2. In something that's strikingly similar to siege weapons, there's just the one unique upgrade, and that's the unlock champion units, and this allows champions to be trained from barracks. So while there's nothing exciting and unique in terms of upgrading your soldiers' armour or attack values, you can at least get your best soldiers from a barracks if you're willing to spend the 1000 metal that it costs. And as metal is the most precious resource if you want to train your champions, then this is a bit paradoxical. So you can have the ability to train lots of champs but not the metal, or vice versa. So unless you're on a map with plenty of metal and the game is lasting a preposterously long time, it's probably not that useful to you. And if I haven't managed to put you off the upgrade that I've just described, or maybe even if I have, you'll probably want to know what champions you actually have access to. And, in fact, even if you don't want the upgrade, it's definitely still worth knowing. So, first up, we have the chariot. Now this has javelins rather than archers, which is the default for chariots. This means you've got a shorter range but a far more powerful attack. They're not cheap at 250 food and 100 each of wood and metal, but their very strong range attack of 36 pierce damage is pretty incredible, and it makes them a valuable addition to the army. The only other option that Britons have is actually also a pretty decent champ. It's an infantry swordsman. Now these have good armour and attack, especially hack attack, and so they're pretty well placed to attack siege weapons, especially rams and siege towers that will just melt away against a decent number of these. And that's your total options, so why don't we move on to heroes? So, just like every other faction, you're going to have 3 heroes on offer. Well, actually you're going to have 1 heroine and 2 heroes, if you want to be pedantic. And they're available from the most commonly used building for heroes, and that is the fortress. So first up, Boadicea is a chariot heroine that throws javelins. This means she's fast and has a good ranged attack. Her bonuses are only for champion units within 40 meters, and they will get a plus 20% attack bonus and a plus 10% added to their speed. Now this is good if you plan on creating a large army of chariot and swordsman champions, but as this would be very unusual, there's little reason to acquire her for her bonuses. So let's move on to the next 2. And second on the list is Cunobelin, and he's a cavalry swordsman and also a healer. Now if you've watched any of my videos before, then you'll probably know that cavalry swordsmen are my absolute favourite heroes. So it's just a shame that his bonus is simply being a healer, giving everyone within 30 meters 0.8 hit points per second back. Now finally, when we come to the third hero, he is without doubt for me the best on offer, Karakatos. He's an infantry swordsman, which makes him the weakest in terms of his attacking ability, but his bonus is without doubt the best on offer. He gives plus 1 armor and plus 15% speed to all of your soldiers and siege engines, and all without having a range limit. Yes, every soldier on the map in your army will have this bonus, regardless of how close they are to himself. It kind of puts the other 2 in the shade, even though, to be fair, I think it'd actually be struggle to make the top 10 heroes in the whole game. So, all in all, it's pretty clear that none of the heroes are game changers in the way that some of the other factions' heroes are. But even if their bonuses aren't the best, they're all good soldiers to simply have on the map, and they can cause a lot of issues for your enemy, so it's not the end of the world. So now that we've looked at everything, why don't we get our heads down and have a think about what we can make of all this information? What kind of strategies might we employ? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do, so let's dive in. Now firstly, you want to develop quickly. That should be your main focus above all else, especially for people just starting out with the faction. This is because you can be at phase 3 within 10 minutes if you aren't attacked and if you get your population up as quickly as possible. Then, once you're a bit familiar with the Britons, why not try rushing with slingers, and it's a great strategy. You can effectively end the game in phase 1, or at very least slow your opponent's development down to the point where you can be in phase 3 while he's lingering around 1 or 2. And from there, you're only a few rams and slingers from an easy victory. Next up, take advantage of the War Dog. This can be to help with hunting, scouting, or raiding. All 3 are very useful, and all 3 will make your development much faster than your opponent's. Also be prepared to build a rotary mill as soon as you can, and set up your farms to have as many as possible within the 60-meter bonus range. If you get this right, then with the 25% increase in productivity, you can use 20% fewer farms. And before you get ready to leave a comment, this maths is correct. A 25% increase in productivity does equate to a 20% decrease in required farms. If you don't believe me, just go and work it out, but you're going to feel silly when you realise that I'm right and you've wasted your time trying to disprove that. And finally, try and make the game as short as possible, as you don't have the siege units or the soldiers for long games. And if you follow the advice given just before this moment, then you should have no problem doing just that. So good luck. And that's the end of the series. Can you believe it? Alpha 23's factions have now all been laid out for you in living colour. Thank God it's finally done, as this has taken literally years of my life. But I'm very proud of what's been achieved, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Obviously now we just need to wait for Alpha 24 to make most of this redundant. God, I hope that's not the case. Anyway, as I've said before, it's difficult for me to find time to make videos at the moment, especially as I won't just be throwing quick videos up just to get one out. If it's going to go up on YouTube, then I want it to be something I'm proud of. But I would like to reaffirm still that I am continuing the channel, and I already have a number of new videos in the works. So if you like, subscribe, ring the bell and all those sorts of things, then once there's a new video ready to go, you'll be amongst the first to know. Until then, muito obrigado e adeus.